In this episode of Collect or Reject,
like I felt it, but like being a person who understands how oppression works, it's a tough pill for me to swallow. But like being mature enough to understand, like, look, somebody's hurting.
Whether you a hero or a villain, expedition leads to crazy feelings. Every page I turn, you know I gotta feel it. New stories everywhere, busting out the comic strip. Story so good, it got me on a power trip. Crazy battles got my mind in a total race. Page 1, the original story takes place. So gear up for the new storyline. Writing so good it sends chills down your spine. Collect or reject, 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 collect or reject.
Greetings, true believers. Welcome to Collect or Reject, a show about comics, or more specifically, lesser known comics. My name is Mark Withers, and I'm honored and privileged to be your host today. Here's how it works. Each week, a guest and I will read 5 issues of a pre-selected title, and based on those 5 issues, we'll try and determine whether or not that comic should be added to your pull list. Today's comic, Jook Joint by Aletha Martinez and T. Franklin. Joining me today to talk about it, the host and moderator of the Facebook group Blerd-Core, as well as an avid collector and purveyor of Black comics. Ladies and gentlemen, Derron Flood. Derron, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much, or purveyor. I like that. You know, I need to put that into my self-proclaimed titles when I'm talking about myself and putting myself on the soapbox. I'm really happy to be here. It's been a little while since I've talked about comics on a podcast, and it's an honor to be here. I can't express how excited I am. And then to also just talk about Black people and Black people in comics, win-win for me.
Absolutely. I've been a part of Blerd-Core for a minute now, ever since I came across the group on Facebook. I'm particularly interested in having you on the show because I've just watched some of your posts and some of your comments. You are extremely knowledgeable, not only about just Black comics and the story arcs within them, but also about the value, the overall dollar value, and how these comics appreciate. That's part of what this show is about. And so I just wanted to thank you in advance for being a part of this.
Thank you, sir.
We have a lot to discuss. Before we do, I just wanted for our audience, if you could give us a little bit about your background and how you got into comics.
Well, I'm not going to give you a little bit. I'm going to give you a whole lot. I don't give anybody a little bit of anything. Not a little bit kind of guy. So how I got into comics, I think for most people my age, I'm 37, it starts with 90s superhero cartoons. And for me, X-Men was everything. It was X-Men, and then it just, it started just going through the roof with Spider-Man and Justice League and Static. But for me, it was 90s X-Men. And if you are familiar with 90s X-Men, after a season stopped, you pretty much had to wait almost a year to 2 years of just straight reruns before they would reboot another season. I just wasn't interested in waiting a whole nother year to figure out why Wolverine is beefing with whoever. And so I decided to just jump into the comic book so I can get a little more familiar with the Marvel Universe. And then I became that nerdy Black kid where, before the internet, I'm trying to, my age, people would always ask me about different superheroes, and I was very proud to be that guy who was like a wealth of knowledge when it came to these superheroes. It went from me just being interested in the stories to actually collecting them as a hobby, and I haven't stopped. I'm on and off, but I've literally been collecting comic books since 1992. Brief hiatuses here and there, but I have well over 6,000 comic books. I don't know how many graded comic books I have. I love comics, man. There isn't a time when I'm not collecting comic books or just even thinking about them. And I get excited about having small talk about comics as well.
That's what we like to hear around here. Tell us a little bit about Blerd-Core and how that sort of originated.
So if you know anything about the nerd community, Black nerds are a minority, an extreme minority. We have our own lanes. There's comic nerds, there's anime nerds, there's all types of nerds. But in comic books, I mean, out of 10,000 people, you might have 5 who are Black there. And culturally, our interests are usually different. And because of that, I saw the need to create a space for Black people so we can enjoy the things that we enjoy culturally, because I mean, we're just different how we view things, and we're different in our interest in things. Not saying that we are monolithic, but I mean, usually when there's a Black character on a superhero team, Black folks just be like, I want him to win. And having that mentality isn't the most healthy in a white dominated space, because people call you woke, people kind of shun you, and they're like, well, why do you always got to make things about race? And I mean, we shouldn't expect them to understand because they're not Black. So I was just like, you know what, instead of having to explain myself why it's important for Black people to root for Black characters, let me just create my own space so we can just enjoy our own selves and the representation that means so much to us.
As a Black reader myself, I definitely appreciate that you did that, for the community. And, when I came across Blerd-Core myself, like I was incredibly intrigued. I actually was put onto it by Omar Angulo, who, we just did an episode just a couple of days ago on Bitter Root, and he was great on that. So I just wanted to express my thanks just for putting a group like that together and just sort of helping to sort of bring this community together nationwide, because a lot of us are from different parts of the country, in some cases, different parts of the world, and wouldn't have even connected otherwise. So I really appreciate that you did that.
Yeah, and thanks for being a part of it. I mean, this is what it's about, to be able to get together, create things, and, you created a platform. If there's any one thing that I can dream about, it's about things like this. You know what I'm saying? Being able to contribute to other Black folks' ideals and be excited about them at the same time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with that, let's just jump right in to the subject at hand, Jook Joint. Now, I am terrible at describing the premise behind books. I'm a stutterer. I lose my train of thought a lot of times. So I'm going to reach into the actual comic description that is in a lot of the intros. So it says, the Jook Joint is a place where all your desires and fantasies can come true as long as you follow the rules, especially the most important one: keep your hands to yourself. Some men think these rules don't apply to them, so Mahalia and her coven of slaying women have no problem reminding them that everyone should adhere to these rules. As the music dies down, Mahalia uses her supernatural powers to help the sick, the frightened, and those who have suffered abuse and desire vengeance. Now that right there, if I had not seen a single panel, I would want to read this book. But I want to hear from you. You've read this twice, as we've sort of talked off mic about this. What is your overall feeling about this book?
So first and foremost, I want to congratulate T and Alethea on their courage to do something like this, because it's extremely polarizing. I would even like to shout out Image Comics, and I'm not big on congratulating or giving props to big corps, but like, it's edgy. It's very edgy. And I know when big corporations take chances like that, it can, bite them on the butt. I enjoyed the book for a number of reasons. For the cultural history, when I saw the title Jook Joint, it grabbed me, because when you think about a Jook Joint, it's basically like a Southern like outhouse for people who were stressed from the everyday life of being either a slave or coming out of really, really harsh white American society. Right. So they had the outhouse there. They can do whatever they want. They can drink, they can party, they can smoke, they can do whatever they want. And it was almost like a stress reliever. So for me personally, somebody who's thoroughly tied intimately to Black American culture, like, it was a must just from the literal title. Like, okay, cool, I don't care what's in here, there's 2 Black women doing it and they're talking about a Jook Joint, let's grab it. But when I actually got into the book, my eyes was like, oh shit. I mean, it's like immediately, from what I remember, the first couple of pages, the intimacy, literal intimacy, I've never read anything like that. I mean, I'm just going to be completely honest, because, I'm a capes and cows guy. I love superheroes. And this was something very, very, very different. when you think about Auntie Mahalia, I mean, she was a superhero in her own right, depending on how you view it, right? If you're Black, for sure. If you're a woman, absolutely. But yeah, like polarizing would be the first thing that comes to mind. I have a couple of like just key words in mind that comes when I think about this book, but I'm going to let you have it before I actually get into some of the keywords that I consider when I've read this two-part series.
Okay. Well, here's my 2 cents on it. Now, I am of two minds of this book, to be honest. So when I initially heard about the book, and I actually heard about it first, if not through you, through one of the other Blerd-Core members, they were kind of like talking about it in a post. So I went and I sought it out. And the first thing that I saw was that cover of Mahalia with the chopped off head and just blood all over her face. I was like, what is this?
Right.
And, you know, and then as I read it, I was just increasingly more and more shocked by how graphic the book is. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I kind of enjoy, especially when the art is done well, when the color work is done well, some of these graphic images. On the other hand, some of the dialogue in it was a little choppy. Some of the character development felt a little rushed, which probably can't be helped because you're only dealing with 2 issues here. That aside, I did enjoy the book quite a bit. And I know that there was a plan to come out with 3 more issues. I don't know if that's still in the works or not. I mean, it's been a few years. I really enjoy Mahalia as a central character. Also, Heloise and her internal struggle. There was a realistic component that you see in abuse, right? Like where someone has an abuser and they want them gone, but then they feel the regret of like, are these things my fault? Like, should I be more forgiving? Should I give this person another chance? And you see all that in that character. There are very poignant moments within that book where that's revealed in a realistic way. And I appreciated that.
Right. And to piggyback off of, well, I think that T did an amazing job with Heloise with that struggle, particularly when her daughter came up to her and hugged her and asked her about her father. And she immediately felt regret. And she ran to Mahalia and said he didn't mean it. And to your point about struggling with abuse, you see that. And I mean, like, it tugged at me, like, immediately. Like, she's just like, look, Black women especially, you know, it's almost like intrinsic for them to protect their family. They understand the importance of the nuclear family and wanting things to be copacetic and healthy and all of that. And so she was just like, okay, cool. Her thoughts were, if I have to be a punching bag to save my family at that point, you know, that's what I need to do. And I hated it, but it was, I mean, emotionally, it was just like, man, this is so real. You know what I mean? So absolutely. I think that she knocked that clean out the park towards the very end of issue 2, to be continued. But she, you know, she touched her on her head and she was like, well, this is your future if you go down that path. And then it's like, to be continued. And you're like, oh man, I want to see what comes from this. You know what I mean? Like, what decision does she make? You know what I'm saying? Does she continue with the regret and just like, okay, cool, whatever? Or does she follow through with, you know, killing her husband because of the abuse? I thought that was the strongest part of Miss Franklin's writing, particularly that little scene with her daughter, you know, confronting, just explaining to her. And Mahalia did understand too, like, listen, I get it, but this man is going to kill you if you continue to go down this path. So I like that part. I really did. That's probably the strongest out of the 2 issues that, for me personally, I thought that was the strongest writing in the entire series.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I felt like with Mahalia in particular, every time that she exacted vengeance on behalf of somebody else, it made me ask why, like, what was her story? Because she kept hearkening back to like, this happened to me. Like, this is why I need to help other women. This is why I resurrected these slain women to help me, you know? And I kind of wish that somewhere within those 2 issues, I know we got a taste of it, but I wanted to see a little bit more of her backstory and see, how did she get these abilities, first of all? You know
Right.
what I mean?
Right. Right.
But then, like, I wanted them to dig a little bit deeper, and we probably would have gotten that in the subsequent episodes. I keep saying episodes because I'm used to doing TV stuff and movie stuff, so I
It felt like
apologize.
a
But
movie. It's all good.
absolutely, I read it like a movie. So
Right.
in subsequent issues. But yeah, I agree with your point. Just the writing. I know that Aletha Martinez talked about how this book was sort of born out of real life trauma that both of them had, like that Franklin and Martinez had.
Right.
It made me wonder about that and like how much of the real story was poured into this book.
Right. And so to piggyback off of what you were saying, you could feel that. I mean, even in the first issue, I mean, the first page, they have the trigger warning on both issues. There's a trigger warning. But like, I felt a hint of misandry there too. Like, that's the counter there. Mahalia almost seemed like a Mary Sue to a point. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm protecting everybody from these bad guys, like literally.
Yeah.
Literally. I'm even protecting bad guys from guys too. Like, there was no balance at all within. And while I absolutely love T, I just felt like it was a little too one-sided. Like, and maybe we would have gotten a little bit more in the other issues, but you can tell the intention behind the story. It was very intentional. As a man, reading the page, I'm like, oh,
right.
I love you. Do you love me? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
you know what I mean? So I felt that. I definitely felt that. Most importantly, I really felt it. Do you remember that scene where the guy was naked and Mahalia snatched his Johnson off?
I almost forgot about that.
Said it to him. I was just like, oh my word, what is going on in here? Right. And I mean, that's deep.
Yeah.
To be able, so you have to explain to your artists what you want visually. Like, the artist almost has no control. They just do what you want them to.
Right.
Do. I want to sit down with T. Like, yo, let's talk.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But I think that feeling and that emotion was important. I mean, to be able to express that. That's why I enjoy the fact that Image was willing to, like, whoever okayed that. Like, kudos to them. I mean, I'm big on, they call me the SJW warrior. So if anybody needs a platform to talk about things that they're frustrated, even if it is men, I'm all for it. And so, like, to be able to see that and actually be on the opposite end where, I'm the antagonist and having to digest that, because I felt the misandry. I'm not even going to, like, I felt it, but like, being a person who understands how oppression works, it's a tough pill for me to swallow, but like, being mature enough to understand, like, look, somebody's hurting. Right. You know what I'm saying? And I wish it would have just kept going. I really do. A part of maturing, like, just as a person, is being objective, right? Like, being able to understand and empathizing and sympathizing with people. And again, that was the first story that I've ever read something like that where it hit me the way that it did. And then it also makes me want to understand women particularly more. You know what I'm saying? Like, what can I do to be better? You know what I mean? Because I'm reading this, you know what I'm saying? And so, like, also when I'm reading Black creators in general, and you see those same types of instances where, a Black person is fighting against oppression, and I know how it makes me feel. I'm wishing that, more white people would read these books so they can understand them. So, like, it was good for me to read that story. Yeah. I needed to. You know what I'm saying? I needed to. I absolutely did.
Yeah, same. All right, I thought we'd take a minute and talk about the dollar value of these books. Now, when this was initially released, I believe in 2018, the cover price was $3.99. I've done a little bit of digging. I'm not as expert at it as you, but from the sources that I've seen, the average price of these two comics is somewhere in the neighborhood of $8.99 or $9.99. I've seen some where the variants are a little more valuable. With that in mind, does that sway your overall opinion on the plus or the minus side as to whether or not these comics are collectibles?
So for me, no, I think that it adds to the value, but I'm also a social justice warrior. So
Right.
um, I think it's incredible that Black women get into comic books. I think it's incredible that they could, headline comic books. I mean, this is a very, 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 very new thing for the industry just in general. When I was coming up, even when I was a teenager, hell, most of my adulthood, there was no Black women doing comic books, writing them or illustrating for them. So to have both of those on one comic book, if I saw it in the store right now, I would buy it. Because I want to see more Black women in comics. And I understand how important it is to back those thoughts up with your dollars. If you want these people to keep jobs, you got to literally put money into it. So I have no problem. If I sold 5 of them, I'm buying all 5 at the comic book shop right now.
That is
Right.
exactly how I feel about this comic and other comics that are written by Black women. You know, like if you look at like N.K. Jemisin or Eve
Right.
Ewing and the strides that they've made, the doors that they're opening, I don't think that that would happen without the support of Black readers.
For
And
sure.
so that alone is the value for me. So
Same.
yeah, that I would definitely put this on my collect list for that reason.
Right, for sure. And not to take away from Chief Franklin, but there's also a series by Alethea Martinez, and people are familiar with it, of the world of Wakanda. Afua Richardson, Alethea Martinez, they're both worked on that. You know what I'm saying? And it just so happens to be the very first all Black female project by Marvel. So things like that, I have 100. I'm probably lowballing myself. Whenever I see World of Wakanda, I buy it. I have one in particular where I went to a Comic Con where I had all 3 ladies sign that copy. And, for me, I'm like, oh my God, this is history.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I got history in my hand. So it's absolutely a collect. I don't care if it was 50 Cent. Buy them, buy all of them.
And that leads right into, like our final segment here. I was going to ask you for your final verdict, but I think that we both kind of spoiled it for the audience. I think that you would agree that we both would collect this title.
For sure.
Yeah.
And and I follow T Franklin on Instagram. She actually has some of the original artwork for issue 3. I think that she still has some for sale. I mean, she
Oh,
put it up
wow.
for sale not too long ago, and I collect original art too. So I think I might DM her because this sparked something in me, about supporting Black women in their efforts. I think that picking up something like that will kind of tie in, because I could ask her, what original art is just pictures. I don't think there will be anything for me to ask her, hey, what is this page? Tell me about the
Right.
script on this page. So I can tie up some of those loose ends, and maybe we can come back and do this again and say, hey, you remember when we was talking about XYZ? Well, in this page, she said this was going to happen. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I, for one, just really want to find out what happens after issue number 2. We know that the story is laid out. We've seen some of the cover art for the other comics.
Right.
I'm still at a loss as far as like why Image would choose to not go forward with these other 3. Maybe they were a little bit too much for your average reader, and maybe they were afraid. I'm hoping that even if it's outside of Image's purview, that we finally do get these. Maybe just if they were to release them independently through another comic book company, or even if it was like a crowdsourced thing to where we put up the dollars to have those come out.
Right.
I think it's worth it to have that complete story told.
Right, for sure. I don't know how that works, because I think like once you sign the paperwork, I think Image kind of owns rights
Yeah.
to the title. So I don't think that she could work on that particular project outside of Image without their signing off, or even if she got the money to do it. And that's also unfortunate. One thing that I do like about what Image, they allow people to have their short stories told within the company. Unlike Marvel, everything is self-contained into Marvel universe, whether it's 616 or alternative universe. Everything kind of has to like fit within the continuity of what's going on within Marvel Universe, where Jook Joint is something completely different from Spawn, and Spawn is something completely different from Walking Dead, and Walking Dead is something completely like there's no intersectionality at all.
Right. And I was saying to Omar Angulo in another episode that I really respect Image for taking these, I don't even know if I would call it a risk, but really just being open to telling these types of stories. When we talked about Bitter Root, I can't imagine another comic book company taking that on. And when I read that initially, I was thinking that was something that they were like beating on doors trying to get made. But it turned out that Image actually reached out to Sanford Green to have it made. They were like, what ideas do you have? And when he pitched that, they were like, do it. Let's do this. And I really respect them for having that point of view.
Well, for sure. Image has always tooted their horn and being a little bit different. I mean, even in Spawn, do you remember the cartoon?
Yes.
Man, that was far out for a
Yeah.
superhero story. It was, first of all, HBO picked it up, so they won't play it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It was very dark and very different. And this is coming fresh off the 80s where everything was hunky-dory and, really, really cutesy and all of that. And then you take this Black guy, one, you know what I'm saying, two, and you make him literally a hell spawn. That's far out. That was very, very different for the time.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to wrap it up here. And once again, I'd like to thank my guest, Derron Flood, for being here today. Derron, before you go, please tell our audience where they can find you.
I'm in the gym all the time. My Instagram handle is FLOODDR. You see a lot of comic stuff up there, and I also own a gym in Norfolk, Virginia. So if you need any fitness tips or if you need any comic nerd stuff, it's all on my Instagram, FLOODDR.
Okay, and for people in the Norfolk area, what is the name of your gym so they can come visit you?
Fitness First Training Services, 816 East 25th Street. Come on by, say hey or don't.
Well, you heard it here, folks. Now, of course, I want to thank all of you for listening. And if you like what you heard here today, please rate and review this episode. Until next time,
subscribe, throw some comments in there. Joke my bald head. I didn't even get a shave, so you can talk about my bald head in the comments too.
Yes, do all of that. And that's my time, folks. Until next time, this is Mark Withers. Catch you on the next page.
Thank you, sir.
Collect to Reject is a production of Press Play Media in association with Von Keith Sounds. This episode was produced and edited by Mark Withers. Music by Keith Sewell. Jook Joint was created by T. Franklin and Alita Martinez for Image Comics. For more information on this and other episodes, visit us at collectoreject.com.